Hi, I'm Dr. Felice Gersh, and I'm so pleased to join you because I have something very important to share with you. It's information about oral contraceptives and what I'll call similars. For example, you can have contraceptive patches or rings, but they're all in a similar packaging of a so-called estrogen and a progestin. So let's begin with what is the purpose of, and I'm going to say hormonal contraception to be all-inclusive of, once again, the pills, the patches, the rings that have this combined so-called estrogen and progestin. So why were they invented something like 70 years ago? For the simple purpose of preventing unwanted pregnancies. Now here's something that was not known so many decades ago. Fertility is actually a vital sign of female health during the reproductive years. So why is that? Isn't it just about making babies? Well, it turns out that the entire female body is designed to help a woman to be healthy and successful with having a pregnancy and then being healthy to nurse that baby and then do the process several times over. This is how we evolved as a human species. The purpose of life, the prime directive, is the creation of new life. And remember, only humans are the species of animals that actually tries to control their reproductive destiny. Now, I am totally in favor of having babies only when you want them, but we need to understand foundational issues of female health and what happens when you put these chemicals that come along with the ride with hormonal contraception. So remember, they came on the market to prevent unwanted pregnancies. Since then, they have been used for a whole variety of off-label purposes, like preventing heavy bleeding with a period, trying to reduce menstrual cramping, also dealing with acne. And I'm not saying that these aren't sometimes serious, significant, life-changing issues that women face. But what I'm saying is we need to have better solutions, and I'll tell you why. Because what's in these hormonal contraceptives? They are not human hormones. They do not regulate or fix a woman's hormones. What they do is they shut down the ovarian function. So the ovaries make none of the estrogen, none of the progesterone that an ovary of a reproductive woman should make. And what's replaced in the female body are actually endocrine disruptors. These chemicals that are in birth control, contraceptive, hormonal, pills, patches, rings, they're not human hormones. Now, the word hormones is used and applied to them, but if you redefine a hormone as something that is natural or innate to a human body, then they would not ever be able to have the word hormone applied to them because they are technically, and this is not like a minor detail, you could go to toxicology.gov, which is a branch of the National Institute of Health, and every ingredient in these hormonal contraceptives is officially listed as an endocrine disruptor. Now, what is an endocrine disruptor? It's a chemical that can have any or all of the following effects. It can interfere with the production, distribution, receptor function, degradation, or elimination of your own natural hormones. Now, when it comes to these particular chemicals that are called hormones but are technically endocrine disruptors, they interfere clearly with the production. They shut down the production of the human hormones, the estrogen that is made from the ovaries, which is called E2 or estradiol, and progesterone. It also dramatically reduces the production of testosterone as well. And there are many other different issues that come up. But today I want you to understand fundamentally that the chemicals in these hormonal contraceptives are not human hormones. They do not regulate the ovaries. They don't fix the ovaries. They shut down the ovaries. What difference does it make, you may say? These chemical endocrine disruptors are producing better effect. That is not true, because they are different chemicals than what the ovaries make. They lack the beautiful rhythm, and they have a very different effect. So the estrogen, that's what they call it, but remember, it's really a xenoestrogen. It's a chemical that is designed to interfere with the normal function of our ovaries, the production and utilization of estradiol, the ovarian-produced estrogen. So what comes from these hormonal contraceptives is almost all, there's like an exception here and there, but they're never human hormones, and it's typically ethinyl estradiol. Now that sounds a lot like estradiol, but it doesn't take much to make it different. It has a different molecule attached. And so when it goes into the bloodstream, it goes in as a different chemical with a different effect than the natural estrogen estradiol that's made by the ovary. The human body has different estrogen receptors, alpha, beta, and a membrane receptor, and they interact with one another. They're different propensities in different organs, and the so-called estrogen, it's a xenoestrogen endocrine disruptor from hormonal contraceptives, acts differently on the hormone receptors than the natural ovarian-produced estradiol. So you have a different effect. It doesn't take much to make a very different molecule have a very different effect in the body. This is not exactly the same, but I'm going to use it as an analogy. The molecular composition of water is H2O. So it's 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. What happens if you add 1 more oxygen? Now it's H2O2. Well, that product is now called hydrogen peroxide, which you would never drink or pour into the pots that hold your beautiful plants. So just adding 1 element, 1 oxygen, totally changes water into hydrogen peroxide. When you add this molecule to ethinyl estradiol to create ethinyl estradiol, you have a very different effect. And what about the so-called progestin? So the ovaries make progesterone. But if you have a chemical endocrine disruptor for progesterone, they call it progestin. That's a man-made up word for an endocrine disruptor for progesterone. So it blocks the natural production of progesterone. And these chemicals, there are different ones in different hormonal contraceptives. They have different effects on other molecules and hormones in the body. For example, one of them, levonorgestrel, that's found in certain birth control pills, it can act as a testosterone endocrine disruptor, an aldosterone endocrine disruptor. So different other steroid hormones can be interfered with as well. So it's really not a human hormone. So the takeaway, and this is so important to know, that the molecules, the chemicals that are in hormonal contraceptives, patches, rings, and the pills, they're not human hormones. They have very different effects in the body, and they have an array of negative effects because real human hormones have receptors on every organ system. So the takeaway, I'm going to just give you this because we'll talk about more another day. But this is such an important takeaway because when you see many doctors, they say, these are good for you. These are regulating your ovaries. They're not. They're shutting down your ovaries. They're taking away your beautiful natural hormones and rhythms. And to me, when you have messed up periods, irregular, too heavy, painful, the solution isn't to shut down your ovaries so you don't make those beautiful hormones, but to work to understand why the ovaries are not giving you the beautiful, natural, painless or marginally painful, nothing that is going to disrupt your life kind of periods. Something is wrong. If their periods are not right, then something is wrong, and we need to find out what that is, and then we need to fix it. If you don't want to have a baby, I don't want you to have one. There are other contraceptives out there, and if you need to go on birth control pills, try to make it the shortest possible time. So less is more when it comes to being on chemical endocrine disruptors. So we don't want to have, for example, increased risk of blood clotting. And that's an important thing. Most everyone knows that birth control pill hormones, and whether they're from a ring or from a patch, they increase the risk of blood clots. And why is that? Because they create a low-level chronic state of inflammation, and a response to inflammation is to have more blood clotting. There are other solutions that are out there for any kind of menstrual problem, and there are other options for birth control. I'm not saying I've got the great solution to preventing pregnancies, but we need to understand that when possible, and I'm not saying that's always, but when possible, choose a barrier method like condoms or a diaphragm, which I can still prescribe and fit people for, or the contraceptive gel, and be very careful. And when you have to use something like an oral contraceptive or hormonal contraceptives, try to use them for the shortest possible time. And for menstrual cycle problems, we do have other ways to understand why the menstrual cycle is having the problems that are happening, and then actually get to the root cause and get things right. So we'll talk more about many female topics. So I hope you'll keep joining me for my Instagram lives.